Time now to bring on board a very special guest, Dr. Kaushik Basu, Chief Economic Advisor to the Ministry of Finance. He joins us from New Delhi now. Mr. Basu, morning. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Basu, it's a situation currently of glass half full and half empty. Inflation has started showing signs of coming down, but the concern here is that crude prices and other macro variables are just not supportive. Do you think what we've seen in food inflation, at least in last 2 or 3 weeks, that is a trend, or that was a one-time aberration?
Food inflation has become negative, minus over 3%. I think this will last only for a couple of weeks, and mercifully so, because you don't want negative inflation to sustain over a longish time. So sometime into February, I expect the food inflation to turn positive again, but a low positive number, which is the ideal. You don't want deflation on food, but you want a low tolerable inflation, and that's the direction in which I expect it to go. So the negative inflation will probably last only for a couple of weeks.
Dr. Basu, morning. Many brokerages have cut India's growth forecast down to sub 7% levels. How confident are you of achieving a 7.5% GDP growth target for this fiscal?
We may not get to 7.5%, but I'm expecting us to be somewhere between 7 and 7.5%. We are right now, there are researchers in the economic division in the Ministry of Finance who are working on this. We will very soon have a number. But I think that the third quarter is going to be the worst quarter of this year, and we will see a revival in the final quarter, which we are already into. So overall, it should be above 7, but below 7.5 is what I'm expecting this year.
Right. Mr. Basu, you just mentioned that the third quarter will be the worst quarter. So how much do you expect the industrial production to slow down by in the third quarter?
I expect IIP growth to improve in the immediate run. However, you have to keep in mind that IIP numbers are among the most volatile numbers that we get statistically in India. So to see some fluctuation in the future on IIP should not catch us by surprise. But overall, my feeling is that for industrial growth, the worst is behind us. We should begin to see a slow pickup that should start quite soon. And even if there are some fluctuations in IIP growth, and there will bound to be some fluctuation because we know historically that this is volatile data, but the trend is going to be a slow upward trend.
Dr. Basu, many PSU stocks were up sharply last week on hopes that PSUs will buy back shares from the government or the government's holdings in other PSUs. How likely is that, especially since there seems to be a lack of consensus between different ministries at this point in time?
This is something which is being discussed. I cannot comment on that, but I will tell you a very, very simple principle that we will use, that there are certain kinds of disinvestment which you can do, which are very legitimate, which are completely transparent. There are other kinds of disinvestment which really mean very little in terms of substance. It's just moving money from one hand to another. We will not do those kinds of changes, but we may make some very, very transparent kinds of disinvestment. But the route that we will go, how much, where, at this point of time, I cannot comment on that.
Basu, the disinvestment target for the current financial year is 40,000 crore. And Government of India has only managed to mop about 1,100 crore by the disinvestment route. Q4 already has started. Do you think Government of India will find it extremely difficult to meet the disinvestment target of 40,000 crore?
It's going to be very difficult. So I'm not confident on the full target of 40,000. I'm not confident of that.
Dr. Basu, an RBI Deputy Governor, he recently indicated that a rate hike pause may not mean a rate cut soon. Do you think there's case for a rate cut in the Jan policy?
Certainly, what that RBI commentator, I don't know who you're referring to, said, which is correct, that when RBI says that there is a pause, it does not mean that from here onwards it's going to go down, but it is suggesting that the direction in which it was going, that is going to be stalled. If you ask my opinion on where should we go, I mean, I don't know what the Reserve Bank of India will do. It's got a lot of great expertise and it will take a decision. My feeling is that the direction in which we go should be in terms of a focus on growth at this point of time, which means, again, I don't know at what pace, how quickly, but the direction ought to be that of lowering of interest rates, which is moving a little bit towards the global interest rates, industrialized country interest rates. At what pace, when, I don't know, but that is the direction in which I would recommend, if I was recommending, that that's the direction in which we ought to go.
Right, Mr. Basu, let me talk about something which is of immense market curiosity, the fiscal management or the fiscal deficit. You've already indicated that government will find it extremely difficult to meet the disinvestment target. We've got a comment from Finance Ministry where they have also indicated that it will be difficult for them to stick to their earlier projection of 4.4% of fiscal deficit target. So what is your number for the year 2012?
Yes, first of all, I should tell you that you should not equate the borrowing with the fiscal deficit totally, simply because a part of this is because small savings went short, so there had to be some excessive borrowing. Having said that, what you are suggesting is correct. It's very, very unlikely that we will be able to make it is very unlikely that we will be able to make the target fiscal deficit of 4.6%. We will miss that target. But in today's climate, where the whole world is on the brink of another recession, this is not such a big disaster that we may miss this target, because after all, we do know that fiscal deficit is an instrument for fighting a recession or a near recession situation. Just the only important thing that I would like our ministry and government to keep in mind is that yes, this is a very special year and this may have happened, but we must not deviate from the path of consolidation. So as soon as we are back again talking about the next year and the year after that, the direction should be that of fiscal consolidation, even if we have missed the target this year.
Dr. Basu, finally, what's your outlook on capital inflows this year? Do you see the foreign institutional investors returning to the stock market in FY13?
It's not that I'm holding back an answer. It's just so difficult to predict. And, you know, it is not just to do with the Indian economy. A lot of the FII flows is a response to what is happening in Europe. We have seen earlier that every time Europe sneezes, money from all over the emerging economies exit and head towards the US Treasury. So I feel the flow of FIIs will depend much more on the European situation than actually what happens in India. If Europe remains more or less stable, given that India's medium to long run growth prospects are very high, the broad direction of FII flows should be inwards into India, so that is what I would expect. But any sneeze in Europe and that prediction will go wrong, so this is not a prediction on which I will put too much of a weight.